The Rings of Power, the billion-dollar show created to waste the audience's time. Although it was better than the last episode, the story still hasn't progressed any further. So we start off with the most evil creatures on Middle-earth, the Harfoots. They are taking a short break in the middle of their migration and Nori is teaching not Gandalf English, who clearly has no concept of their language but somehow magically understands when she explains. It's like the plot wants him to understand those words. Moving on, as we get a map sequence, we see them moving through the land. It shows them passing through the dead marshes, now the grey marshes, where the War of the Last Alliance will take place. Funnily, we also get to see a skeleton of a hobbit cart left behind during past migrations. I'm sure Sadok wrote down his name somewhere in his book. Anyways, we are back at the crater where not Gandalf crashed, and we get introduced to the real Slim Lady, or Feminem, whatever you want to call her, along with two other women inspecting the crater. And if there was any doubt whether these mysterious cultists are good or evil, I hope the Kubrick stare clears it up. Back at Adar, who is kind of sunbathing, an orc reports the tunnel is complete. Adar asks the orc to lay out his arm, and we find out that the orc has been turned into vampires, as his arm smokes and sizzles in the sun and boils form all over his arm. I know the orcs hate sunlight as it weakens them, but this is just absurd. Guess the writers just forgot about it over here. Last week, Adar was almost in tears when he saw an orc dying. Today, he is intentionally torturing them. He also mentions soon the sun will be gone, which could be referring to Mount Doom erupting and covering the skies in ash cloud. Next, we are back in the watchtower and Bronwyn is trying to give a speech to motivate the crowd to fight alongside her.
I know I'm not the king you have awaited.
Well, no shit.
Who will stand with me?
Oops, wrong question.
Who among you will stand and fight?
Why? Who are you? Who died and made you boss? You're just an herbalist. Do you even know how to hold a sword, darling? The man behind you is more apt in leading them than you. So anyways, the tavern owner steals her thunder by giving a more idiotic speech.
Stand and fight, you will die. I'll say this for our ancestors. They lived!
And leaves with most men to join with the orcs. Meanwhile in Numenor, we see the people readying the ships to leave for Middle-earth. Isildur wants Elendil to put him in front of the line because suddenly he decided to go to Middle-earth because he is searching for something, but neither he nor the writers can tell what exactly he is looking for. But Elendil is having none of that and tells Isildur that he has already made his choice when he decided to get himself thrown off the sea guard. Back in the Númenórean court, chaos has ensued, as people suddenly realize that they hate the elves. But no one batted an eye when Miriel gave the speech last episode, and everyone was so eager to join the expedition. Then we see Halbrand, forging, because that is definitely not a hint at him being Sauron. Turns out he ratted on Galadriel to Pharazôn to get his guild crest, which ironically everyone could have guessed where she was going after her escape from the dungeons, since demanding to see the king got her thrown in the dungeon in the first place. Anyways, the smith then informs him that he has got visitors. So, he goes to visit Miriel and Galadriel.
Wait a minute!
That's not how visitors work. Back in the throne room, Miriel mentioned she is looking forward to working with Halbrand during their expedition to Middle-earth. This kinda shocks Halbrand. Turns out that Galadriel has lied to Miriel about Halbrand wanting to go back to Middle-earth to fight for his people. And Galadriel still acts like a conceited, arrogant little bitch and tries to play the victim card on top of that, by saying that she has convinced the Númenóreans to send 5 ships and 500 men to aid his people and place a crown upon his head. In a way, many would assume that he has used her. What a conniving, manipulative little cunt. You did all this to further your own vendetta, not to help him. So Halbrand rips up his neck pouch and says to go fuck herself. And then we are back with the Harfoots, going through the forest. And if you didn't already know that they are the vilest creatures in Middle-earth, here is Malva telling Sadok to take the wheels of the Brandyfoot cart and leave them for dead. Cause she didn't find more mushrooms than the previous year and thinks it's all because of the stranger and the Brandyfoots. Turns out they are also being tracked by the wolves, and in any case the audience doesn't understand even after seeing the wolf prints in the mud. They say,
Wolves. No way!
then they get attacked by the worst looking wolves, which looked more like warthogs to me. And quite frankly, I was rooting for the wolves, and it was looking quite favorable toward the wolves as the Harfoots were trying to escape from them by climbing this shit tree. But unfortunately, not Gandalf jumps in and saves the day with an ultralight version of the Word of Power. Gamers will know what I mean. But in the process, hurting his arm. We are then back in Numenor. The volunteers are training, and Elendil asks Galadriel to give them some training. And if you thought last week's prison fight with Galadriel was bad, well, she tops it off this week with the worst choreographed fight sequence I have ever seen. And she gives some worst advice on how to fight orcs.
Stab, twist, gut.
Well, thanks for that. Never knew you could kill a orc by stabbing him.
Swordsmanship is about balance rather than strength. Fight with your feet, not your arms.
What?
Never trust brute force to best an orc.
Moreover, the whole sequence takes place in the streets with real swords, and instead of teaching or learning the moves first, everyone is just hacking at each other with full force. What happens if you accidentally chop off someone's arm or head? Don't you have barracks or training grounds? And why not use wooden swords if you're learning to fight first? And not to mention, you made a guy lieutenant who clearly has no experience in battle or leading an army. When you think this show can't get any worse, it subverts our expectation and gets even worse. We then cut to Pharazôn and Kemen, where Kemen is trying to change his father's mind in helping Mithril with the war effort in the Southlands, because of a random woman he met in the market yesterday told him to do so. It seems that in this show the Númenóreans hasn't established any outposts or port cities throughout Middle-earth or trading routes with anyone. So Pharazôn tells Kemen that he is doing this to owe a favor from the king of the Southlands if they help him reclaim the throne for him. In return, they will get resources, trade and tribute from them, which seems rather smart. Next we get a scene with King Tar-Palantir where he tells Mithril not to go to Middle-earth, cause all he sees is darkness awaiting for her there. Back with the Harfoots, Nord Gandalf is amidst an incantation to heal his hand, and Nori, like an idiot, tries to touch his arm when she can clearly see his arm freezing over. So she gets blown away from the shockwave when the ice breaks, which scares her and she runs away, as the tree starts to bend ominously. We then cut to Lindon, where Durin the Fourth is having dinner with the elves, which feels more like an ambush as Gil-galad prods Durin regarding their find, and they butt heads for a while without anyone giving out their secrets. Durin also points out that the table they are eating is kind of precious and sacred to them, as they use it for monuments and tombs for their honored dead, to which Gil-galad says he will return it with Durin so it can be treated with proper respect. But apparently everyone still continues to eat on the table after that. And then we get the most atrocious lore aspect from these hack writers. They give a lousy, totally nonsensical origin to Mithril, which, on the first place, never needed an origin. It's probably based on orichalcum, the mysterious ore found in Atlantis. So according to these hacks, a Silmaril was hidden in a tree atop the Misty Mountains, where an elf and a Balrog fought over it. As the elf poured all his light into protecting it, and the Balrog poured all his hatred into destroying it. Then the tree was struck by lightning, which merged these three powers, the good, the bad, and the Silmaril, and in turn created Mithril, a material as pure and light as good, and as strong and unyielding as evil, an ore containing the light of the Silmaril. So the retarded writers just turned Mithril into a MacGuffin, so that they can create some forced conflict between the elves and the dwarves. Talking about forced conflict, we then get some between Gil-galad and Elrond, as Elrond the moron clearly gives away the dwarf secret after narrating the story of Mithril.
The mountain depths where for centuries now it has waited. Durin's right.
Then tries to hide it by saying, I promised Durin never to reveal his people's secret, when Gil-galad catches him on his word.
Then you admit the dwarves did find it.
Yeah, I can't tell you that Durin has found Mithril because I promised Durin that I'll never tell anyone that he has found Mithril. Sheesh, what is this show? And what is this writing? Feels like my brain cells are dying bit by bit every episode. Then we come to know that Gil-galad lied to Elrond about the real reason for sending him to Khazad-dûm. He shows a corrupted tree and says the light of the Eldar are leaving the elves, and they will perish unless they leave Middle-earth and return to Valinor. He sent Galadriel away hoping that the last vestiges of war leaving with her would stop the decay, but it has only quickened. Back in Númenor, Isildur talks to his friend Valandil, who is now a lieutenant, to let him join on the expedition, and he is ready to give 2 free hits to make things right between them. Valandil takes the free hits but denies him a slot on the boat, as he tells him that he is his oldest friend, but he can't stake his name recommending Isildur for a duty that he might well decide to abandon. We then cut to Kemen, who has snuck into one of the ships to burn it down, and finds Isildur stowing away. After a brief scuffle, the ship catches on fire and blows up, taking down another ship beside. They both get hauled out of the water by Elendil and the guards, and they come up with a lame-ass story of Kemen being in a fishing boat and Isildur saving him. Back with Miriel, Pharazôn suggests postponing the decision of going to Middle-earth, but Galadriel presses on. Miriel mentions she will reconvene the council tomorrow and make a final decision on this matter. Back in Lindon, moron Elrond gives Celebrimbor the Mithril for inspection, and he still thinks he hasn't broken his oath to Durin. Celebrimbor tells him that he has been lying to Elrond as well, and he knew about Gil-galad's plan. He also mentions that if they can secure vast quantities of Mithril to saturate every elf in Middle-earth with its light, it can be their salvation. In Númenor, Sauron, fake Aragorn, Halbrand, is trying to sweep the floor with a god-awful broom. This probably is an allegory to how the show is doing so far. So Galadriel comes to apologize for using him and tries to use him some more.
Then help yourself. Stop fighting me, and together let us fight them.
Halbrand mentions he has done some awful things to survive back home, and he never wishes to return, for everyone will spurn him for that, even Galadriel. While he is talking, we see the tavern owner and his band kneel before Adar, but Galadriel presses on.
Sometimes to find the light, we must first touch the darkness.
No, we don't. That doesn't make a lick of sense. We don't need to murder someone before we can save someone. So this kind of idiotic dialogue goes on for a bit. Halbrand asks why she keeps fighting, and she comes back with a brilliant reply.
Because I cannot stop.
Yeah, that made a lot of sense, you psychopath. Not that you can't stop, you choose not to. You have not fought anyone for centuries, just chased after ghosts. She says that the mutiny against her and Gil-galad and Elrond exiling her were because they couldn't distinguish between her and the evil she was fighting. I can't blame them for that. Anyone who actually spends 5 minutes with her will get the same notion. But that still doesn't make it the truth. You can see that Galadriel is a lying manipulator. She did it in the throne room and she is doing it now as well. She doesn't give a fuck about anyone, she uses everyone to get to her own agendas. Meanwhile, the tavern owner pledges his loyalty to Adar, thinking he is Sauron, and Adar makes him kill Rohan to enter into his service along with the others. Back in Osterith, Arondir is teaching Theo how to use a bow. Theo shows him the broken sword hilt and talk about the mother of coincidences. Arondir has seen that before on the wall right behind him.
We're all standing up now. Bunch of jackasses standing in a circle.
He mentions it is a key of some sort, conjured by the enemy by some forgotten craft to enslave their ancestors. He also mentions the enemy will attack probably within days or hours. Well, what is it? Days or minutes? Fat load of good you are. Arondir and Bronwyn have an argument, where Bronwyn totally flips 180 and suggests bowing down to the enemy to survive. As she also mentions that the tower will fall when they march upon, and just like that, they get the idea to drop the tower on top of the enemy. I still don't know why they decided to hole up on that watchtower, when clearly they don't know how to fight for shit and defend the tower. Why not march west or northwest? It's like the repurposed hack writers wanted to create something similar to the Battle of Helm's Deep. Only this time it won't be the Battle of the Two Towers, but one measly tower, and the Númenóreans coming to the rescue like Gandalf with the Rohirrim on the first light of the fifth day. And with this we see Adar and the orcs begins their march towards Osterith. We then cut to the elves, who all decided to carry the table the whole way to Khazad-dûm, instead of using a cart, or better yet, a horse-driven one. And we see Durin is having a laugh, because he just made up the whole story about the table and the stone. So Elrond tries to beat around the bush on how to break the news of Mithril to Durin. To which Durin says,
Give me the meat and give it to me raw.
What the fuck?
To us, raw and wriggling.
Elrond then confesses to Durin that he was lied to about the real intentions behind his visit to Khazad-dûm, and tells Durin they really need the Mithril. Without it, they must either sail back to Valinor or perish. And the dialogue is pretty much reminiscent of the scene from The Return of the King.
Arwen is dying. She will not long survive the evil that now spreads from Mordor. The light of the even star is failing. As Sauron's power grows, her strength wanes.
And that the fate of the elves rests upon Durin's hands. As they walk off towards Khazad-dûm, we see stalker elf Gil-galad watching them from behind. We end the episode with the Númenóreans doing the exact same thing they set out to do on the last episode, sailing to Middle-earth. Clearly recalling the scene similar to the one in Return of the King. But now with 3 ships instead of 5, which also means now they have only 300 men, which is still kind of a stretch seeing the size of the ships, unless they are the TARDIS or they have the extension charm placed on the ship. But why go with 300 men? Does a grand empire like Númenor, with a prominent navy, not have any spare ships? They already have the 500 volunteers. Why not take them as well? Also regarding the state of military in Númenor, why does the Númenóreans even need volunteers when they were a grand empire with massive army known throughout for their hardiness and battle prowess? They were the Giga Chads among men. They were stronger, smarter, lived longer, and fierce warriors. But for some reason, they had to call upon volunteers to fight against a foe they have no knowledge about. They have decided to take 500 men, which now came down to 300 men, to fight against an enemy which could be 5,000 or 50,000. Why not send a scouting team first for reconnaissance? I don't know what the writers were smoking when they wrote this script, because nothing makes sense in this show. Not to mention the god-awful armors of the Númenóreans and the helm of Elendil, which is made to look similar to the Fountain Guard's helm of Minas Tirith. But those looks dope, while this one looks like utter shit. It looks like a bad Flash cosplayer. They have spent $1 billion on the show, yet they cannot get a decent attire or armors, not to mention the god-awful CGI of the creatures. Although it was less boring than the previous episode, but it does nothing to progress the story. Galadriel is still an insufferable conniving little bitch. The Harfoots are still migrating. The stranger is still a mystery. Adar is still a mystery. Halbrand is still Sauron playing at being fake Aragorn. Arondir and Bronwyn are still holed up in the watchtower. And the Númenóreans have once again decided to sail to Middle-earth. Only new thing we learned is Gil-galad and the elves are assholes as well as idiots. And the showrunners are even bigger assholes for totally destroying Tolkien's lore on the origins of Mithril. The elves are immortal, nothing can steal their light. If Melkor, the original Dark Lord who literally destroyed the two trees and covered the entire world in darkness, couldn't steal their light, nothing can. They have survived for thousands of years fighting the darkness. This is an abomination of a show. The show has nothing to do with Professor Tolkien's world. The showrunners clearly has no idea or understanding of the world Tolkien has created. Neither do they want to. They just bought the rights to use the name of Tolkien and Lord of the Rings to pass off their own agenda-driven crap story so that they can dupe the people in watching their crappy show.